video is going to look at interactivity, the ability of the player to participate in games. We will consider two main types of interactivity in games: interactive gameplay and interactive narrative. In gaming, interactivity is the player's ability to control the gameplay and influence the outcome. Player choices and actions are central to gameplay, and playing the game requires some level of skill on the part of the player. Because skill is required, games generally have a mechanism to let players choose an appropriate level of challenge. We should acknowledge that not all games have a narrative, with games like chess played for the enjoyment of the challenge. The most common form of interactivity in gaming is interactive gameplay. The player is given control over a character or other gameplay elements, and they use these to influence the flow of play.
Frost, get on the console!
The player gains enjoyment from overcoming the gameplay challenges.
3, 2, 1, turn!
If the game has a storyline, it is fixed, with each player experiencing a similar story outcome. In this way, interactive gameplay titles are like interactive movies, with the bulk of the narrative often contained in non-interactive cutscenes between levels. While each player shares the same overall story experience, the individual nature of their gameplay experiences creates the illusion of participation. So while everyone who finishes the game shares a similar outcome, they feel like they've had an immersive and individual story experience.
Overlord, mission complete. All Eagles accounted for.
One genre which plays heavily on a fixed story with interactive gameplay are Japanese role-playing games, or JRPGs. JRPGs like the Final Fantasy series are strongly story-focused, often with elaborate storylines and strong characters. Players are usually forced to play a predetermined character within the story, with very few customization options available. Gameplay generally offers few opportunities for players to make decisions which would alter the predetermined storyline. Western RPGs tend to offer players more customization options and more freedom to choose a path through the story. JRPG titles are strongly influenced by the Japanese manga tradition, and their distinctive art style harks back to the tradition of kawaii, or cuteness.
My honor. My dreams. They're yours now.
The androgynous and often childlike characters echo the ancient art tradition of Bishonen, or beautiful boy.
I'm your living legacy.
Because like most games, JRPGs have interactive gameplay, player skill, actions and decisions vary their playing experience, but the overall story arc is fixed. We have discussed interactive gameplay, but games with interactive narrative are much rarer. In an interactive narrative, the player's actions and choices drive the story arc. This means players might experience very different story outcomes depending on their choices or gameplay performance. Because of the complexity of branching storylines, interactive narratives are much rarer than games with interactive gameplay. One simpler alternative to a fully branching interactive narrative is a constrained narrative. Constrained narratives provide multiple decision pathways through the story, but each player ultimately achieves the same final outcome. A good example of interactive narrative with branching storylines and multiple outcomes is the Mass Effect series.
Many decisions lie ahead. None of them easy.
Players take the role of Commander Shepard in a science fiction universe. Players choose their gender, appearance and history, as well as allocating skill points to develop their character to suit their individual playstyle. In this way, a character may emphasize combat skill, stealth, or technical abilities according to their gameplay preference.
Tell me about this mothership you saw.
Player choice is central to the gameplay, and the choices a player makes directly influences their gameplay experience and the overall story arc. Actions taken during gameplay determine Commander Shepard's reputation, which is reflected using Paragon and Renegade points. A higher Paragon rating unlocks additional persuasion dialogue options, while Renegade points allow you to threaten information out of non-player characters. These choices even carry over between games, with the player importing their existing character into subsequent titles. There are 7 possible endings to Mass Effect 3. The specific ending options available depend on the character's performance, and then the player must choose between trying to destroy, control, or synthesize with the enemy Reapers.
The paths are open, but you have to choose.
The ending can see Earth survive or be destroyed, Shepard's teammates surviving, dying, or being assimilated, and Shepard may also live or die. The danger with multiple endings is that players can be frustrated with an unsatisfactory outcome. Gaming is, after all, an entertainment activity. Rather than providing simple win-lose endings, developers are better to give players different levels of winning. So, interactivity, the ability of the player to control gameplay, is the cornerstone of gaming, separating them from movies and television. While all games feature interactive gameplay, a narrative component is not a requirement, with many games not having a storyline at all. Most games that do tell a story have linear storylines with a fixed outcome. All players experience the same story. Games with fully interactive narratives provide multiple story paths and alternative endings for players. The decisions and choices made by players are the main driving factor behind the unfolding story. However, they are more complex and expensive to produce. A compromised storytelling technique is the constrained narrative, which provides a fixed beginning and ending to the story, but multiple pathways through the story arc for the players to follow. This gives players an individual experience.